first time we went over to Europe, it was a huge wake-up call. We were so slow and so intimidated, and we were definitely out of our element. We'd never seen anything like that before.
We were racing against probably the strongest Austrian contingency there ever was in history. It was a real rude awakening for us, and we really had to step up our game to be able to compete with these guys.
After a while, it really became apparent that it was an away game. Every game for us was an away game.
We are like the underdogs. We'd have to partner up with the Norwegian team, or the Canadians a little bit, whereas like the Austrians, they'd have like 12 staff on a downhill, videoing everything, taking notes.
You're on the hill during inspection, you don't understand anything people are saying. There's all these different languages flying around. There's all these guys that grew up together, even though that they were Italians and French and Swiss. They had been around each other.
I don't think there's ever a season that you went into where you weren't thinking about Kitzbuehel from the very beginning of the season.
You know, if you're a downhiller, you're going to go to Kitzbuehel someday, and if you don't go to Kitzbuehel, it's hard to really feel like you made it as a downhiller.
We had to rely on Les, and we also worked with each other a lot, like on course reports at the bottom, and you don't see many Europeans doing that. It's like they're fighting tooth and nail more to like keep their like spot on the team.
Joy that the guys take, that I think the American downhillers take out of skiing, Kitzbuehel in particular. I mean, they really enjoy chucking themselves down the Mausefalle, carousel, Steilhang. I mean, they love it. They enjoy doing it, and I think that's what separates those guys from a lot of the other competitions.
And then you have Kitzbuehel, which is more like being at a rock concert the whole week.
It's just mayhem all the time. There's people everywhere constantly having fun.
It's one of the shorter courses on tour, and it is the Mecca, and it's the most dangerous course, and there's 70, sometimes 80,000 people there. Just the sea of black as you're coming into the finish area. It's like you're skiing into a football stadium.
The lure, the energy, the mountain, the hill, the ice, the bumps, the jumps. I mean, you just name it, it's everything. It's the Super Bowl of ski racing.
It is a fight every time you get in that gate, mentally and physically.
We went there with a lot of fear, and we'd pull into town. First thing we'd do before we even go to the hotel, we'd drive up to the finish area, and we'd kind of look up at the hill and go, okay, we're here.
The whole event is scary in a way. It's one of those deals where you hope you can tackle it and ski it in a confident fashion, and that's going to minimize your chances of getting injured. But things change. The weather changes and the course deteriorates, and something goes sideways, and there's a good chance one of your athletes is going to end up in a bad place, and it's definitely not a forgiving hill.
In most downhills, there's one or two places where you can get seriously hurt, maybe even die. In Kitzbuehel, you can die in the first gate.
The first time I went there, I was totally petrified, scared.
I mean, you could be on the downhill team for 4 years, and if you haven't kicked out of Kitzbuehel, it's like, yeah, okay, really?
Back then they had a snow seed, so that was like they drew your name out of a hat, and they put the guys at the end of the start sheet into the starting gate first, so they could pack out the track for the top seed. And anyway, Eric Keck comes down at Kitzbuehel, and he flies over the net on the Mausefalle and lands in the trees and rocks. And then Bill Hudson gets in the starting gate, and he's all fired up, and he goes down off the Mausefalle and does the same thing. Flies over the picket fence and lands in the trees and rocks. And so it's my turn to go, and my coach is like, Mo, just throw him sideways, make it down.
We had this thing where you were a rookie or you're a vet. You were a vet if you not only left the starting gate at Kitzbuehel, but you actually made it to the finish.
It's the toughest race. It's one of the oldest races. And it's so unique. I mean, they would never build that race today.
The width of those trails is when they were going 50, 60 miles an hour. Now they're going 90, 80 to 90.
It's that underdog feeling of stealing something that's the Austrians, stealing something that the Europeans own, and that's what it would be. You come through that finish, Nyman, Ganong, Jared Goldberg, Bryce Bennett, If he can duck under the finish line and win, that would just shock the world.
Kind of just takes the guy who's the most willing to throw down on that day.
To be able to perform at Kitzbuehel is probably, I would say, 99% mental.
There's a couple big turns at Kitzbuehel that I consider to be the toughest in ski racing. The bottom of the Steilhang, that's a long left footer. Then again over the Hausberg, a right footer. Those are two situations where if you want to be fast coming out of those turns, you take the risk every time. More than likely, you're going to go on the fence.
You need to have the experience to understand when and where to risk and how much. You must hang things out.
Your survival mechanism is kicking in, saying, hey, you can't do that.
We hadn't won the Hahnenkamm in the history of the World Cup. So since the World Cup came to be in '67, an American has never won. Everybody that's been somebody, you know, every country that's really been something in ski racing has that ribbon on the wall somehow. And you have to go back in the record books to 56 or 57, I can't remember, but Buddy Warner had won the Hahnenkamm as the only American when it was a classic prior to the World Cup.
It became the holy grail of us. And Bobby Cochran, way back in the 70s, 3rd place at Kitzbuehel. Then there was a big long break. I had a 5th place, and then it was AJ on the podium. Can you believe it? And then Darren Rolfs winning it. I mean, the guy's the king. He's my hero.
It was crazy. Well, first I'll go back to 2001, where I was 3rd on the podium, tied with Stefan Eberharder. Hermann Maier won. 3 Austrians on the podium, standing right next to him, and they cut me out in the paper. I'm not even in the front page. Or 2 years later, I ended up winning in '03, and it said Black Saturday on the front page. They were just like shocked that an Austrian wasn't on the podium and that an American won.
All of a sudden, I hear that, the news is on it, and there's a catastrophe. I mean, it sounds like, it gets my attention enough where I'm like, oh geez, like what, the train derail? Did they have, terrorist attack? And it was no Austrians on the podium. Austrians were shut out and an American won.
It has become very special, and just like that goal of the American downhillers winning the overall globe in downhill, to win Kitzbuehel again after Darren, that's what we're waiting for. That's what I'm waiting for.